Well, thank you everyone for joining us early on a Saturday morning. Welcome to CoDA. I'm going to assume that most of you are newcomers or you're here because you've brought a newcomer. And I just want to say thank you and welcome. If you're not a newcomer, you're going to still learn a lot about CoDA. I'm Linda. I'm codependent. I've been on the events committee for about 3.5 years. And a couple of our other committee members helped put together this presentation. So I want to introduce you to Rona, who, wave, Rona. Rona's waving. There you go. And Alex. So we're going to kind of be your tour guides through CoDA 101 today. And this is kind of, something that we wished we had when we were newcomers. So we're very, very happy to guide you on your journey through CoDA. Today, tell you what's coming up for the rest of the day on the retreat, and just welcome you with open arms. We are very privileged today to have the co-founder of CoDA with us, Mary R. She will be giving the first presentation during the retreat. She logged on early, so you're going to get a special treat, and we're going to ask Mary to explain how CoDA was founded, and we are celebrating our 34th birthday. So Mary, I'm going to turn it over to you. If you can just say hi to everybody and explain, what gave you the idea for CoDA, how it got started, and just a little bit of the history, because we've come quite a long way in 34 years.
Yes, we have. Thank you. And thank you to the committee. You all have done such an amazing job and your service for all of us. So thank you. So little bit on the history. Ken and I had, we were both recovering in Alcoholics Anonymous and had realized that we had no clue on how to do relationships, that we had a lot of issues that kept showing up in our lives. And so initially, Ken was working at a treatment center that treated codependents. And so that was our first kind of, I guess, information about codependence. I really didn't know what it was. I thought it was just a family member or friend of an alcoholic. Didn't really understand the entirety of it. And so we started doing therapy. So that began, and a couple years later, we realized we needed a place to be able to go and talk and share and have support for our codependents. And so Ken actually had come up with the idea. He was driving, we lived in Glendale, Arizona, where he worked was Wickenburg, Arizona. And so he was doing an hour-long drive every day. And the idea came to him about starting a 12-step meeting that would be, that we could invite our friends to, other friends that were also dealing with codependence. And we used to just meet at coffee shops. And so we thought, well, we'll make something a little bit more formal. And so he talked to me about it. And, we both kind of sat with that for a little bit. And then being very codependent that we both were, because we were like poster children for codependence at that time, we went and checked it out with our friends and made sure it was okay to do. So, so from that, we started a process. Ken, I always love telling this story. I remember the night that he was writing the original welcome and the original preamble. And he was in our home office and writing, and he came out at one, he was been in there for hours, and came out at one point and he said, "Can I read this to you?" And he was just like glowing. I don't even know how to describe that. It was just very beautiful. And so he read that, the welcome and the preamble to me, and we both just sat and cried. And it's like, okay, this is what we want. This is what we were looking for ourselves, and what we maybe could help other people as well in this. And so we started going through that process of adapting the steps. We contacted Alcoholics Anonymous to be able to adapt the steps for our purpose, and they gave us permission. They said we just needed to show the original steps along with it, which we did. And then we started going around looking for a meeting room, which was so interesting. We had the hardest time finding a place to have the first meeting. And it ended up being at St. Mary's Episcopal Church in Phoenix, which was interesting for two reasons. One, as a dear friend of ours was an Episcopal priest at that church, and which we didn't know that was the church he was affiliated with. And the other was right across the street from the grade school that I went to. And so, you know, looking at all the family history pieces, it was just interesting that that was the only one. We didn't even live near that area. And that was the only church that we could find. And so that first meeting, we had some friends help us in handing out flyers, and you know, we just put out information everywhere we could think of. There was a local bookstore that sold 12-step books and medallions and different things. And so she let us put some of the flyers in there. You know, we just, it was very grassroots at the time. And so the first meeting we had 30 people show up, which was pretty remarkable for a first meeting about something that, you know, most of us had no clue of what we were doing yet. And Ken shared that night, which was just amazing during that. And the second meeting, we had to move to a different room because we had around 60 people show up. And it kept, I don't remember the exact numbers, but by the fourth meeting, we were like in the entrance way to the church because we had so many people. They didn't have a room big enough for us. So they put us in the entrance to the church. And I think it was after that fourth meeting, another meeting, and the second meeting showed up in Scottsdale. Somebody started that. And it just kept growing. There was, we had the, you know, pretty much had the National Service Office at our home for most of that first year, and so we were getting a lot of the phone calls that were coming in, and it grew like wildfire. The place where the treatment center that Kim was working at, his boss allowed him, we put together newcomer packets to start meetings, and his boss allowed him to hand those out to people as they were leaving treatment. And so people were coming from all over the country to that center, and so all of a sudden meetings started showing up in other areas. I think the first international meeting was in Sweden because there were some Swedish therapists there training at the center that Ken was working at. And so they took some home, but it just kept growing. One of the, there was a recovery magazine, professional magazine, but a recovery magazine that did an article about it. And it was crazy. We would get calls in the middle of the night from people. We would be on the phone with them, and surprised our kids got any sleep during that time. We sure didn't. But we were constantly at my work. They were allowing me to print out the newcomer packets, and so I'm the little office organizer. So I would organize them and get them together and mail them out to people. And it just was so amazing. Within that first year, we started talking to a friend of ours who had been part of Alcoholics Anonymous as a delegate, and he was an attorney, and so he was very familiar with 12-step programs. So we learned early on that we needed to get, get a board of trustees going on to get it put into a nonprofit corporation, all of that. So he helped us put together, his name was Jim, and we're forever grateful to him. He helped us put together all that information and create the nonprofit corporation in the same manner that Alcoholics Anonymous was created. We thought, you know, that was our basis for 12-step programs, and that program had worked for many, many years, so why change anything, you know? So we tried to pattern things the way it was developed, you know, with involving the traditions. There were some 12-step programs around at the time, but they didn't have the traditions involved. We wanted to make sure that was involved because that is the spiritual part of our program. You know, it keeps us on track on how to be with each other and run our meetings, and you know, from our individual meetings all the way up to the service conferences. And so we had a group of people coming together that became our first board of trustees. From that place, we started being able to do a little bit more information. We developed a newspaper during that time, which was called Bear Facts. And now it then ended up turning into being called Connections. But it had a little teddy bear on it, which a friend of ours had created. And we just had so many people jumping in, just like it is today. You know, we are all what make up CoDA. And we had so many people jumping in at that time, helping us out, and which was just amazing. And probably the one thing that I kept getting during that especially during that first year, was just how much I needed that place to be able to go and share and talk, because there were things I could say in CoDA I couldn't say in Alcoholics Anonymous. Because that's not what that program was for. It was there to keep me clean and sober. And I needed to talk about other things that had to do with some of my familyhood trauma and how that affected my relationships and my parenting and all of that. And CoDA gave me that place to do that. So by towards the end of the first year, I think it was the weekend of October 2nd, of 1987. The first meeting was October 22nd, 1986. And then by that following year, in the first weekend in October, we had our first service conference. And so what we did is we just told everybody that had a meeting, if they wanted to send somebody to Arizona, we were going to start setting up the more larger structure of Codependents Anonymous, and to start turning everything over to the fellowship instead of just the board of trustees working it. And so that conference was amazing. We had, I can't remember how many, we had cities show up. So we had many people from maybe the same state, or, you know, but we had so many cities showing up during that. And we all sat down, and it was the most spiritual time of that place, of truly of, you know, turning the whole fellowship over to, you know, the organization, the literature, the writing, the meetings, the everything over to the fellowship. And it was pretty powerful during that. But it is just definitely not by Kim's and my doing in any way. I believe it is a spiritual program, and God took this program and put it on steroids and sent it out there because it just grew like wildfire. And I personally, I believe, because I know how much I needed it. I had no clue about how to heal from past relationships, and then how to have healthy relationships in my life today. And CoDA gave that to me. Truly, you know, I've had people come up to me and share their gratitude, and I so appreciated. I believe the gratitude mainly goes to God for that. But CoDA truly saved my life, and I don't know that I would have been able to stay clean and sober had I not done the codependence work for myself. So it has been many things to me, but most of all, it's been a process of my heart and Ken's heart, and I know I can speak for Ken. It is something that we both feel incredibly blessed that God had given this to us to get the ball rolling with it, to found it. So thank you all. Ken wanted to be here. His sister is very sick in Kauai, and he had to fly out there a week ago Friday to go be with her. So he's unable to be here, but he wanted me to share his love and gratitude to all of you for being here. And thank you. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you, Mary. And please send our best wishes to Ken as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's a great history. And I think you hit the nail on the head. The reason CoDA got so big is because there's such a need out there for it for so many people. So we wanted to get started just by the three of us that put together this presentation telling you how we got here, just because you might be able to relate. Just a couple quick minutes because we have a lot to get through. So for myself, I first heard the word codependency when I was going to therapy, when I was getting divorced in the late 90s. And what I did was I bought a lot of books and I read them. And I thought that knowing about it would fix it, but that didn't quite work. So I got into a series of not very healthy relationships that prompted me to go to CoDA. And the first year and a half that I went once a week, and I told everybody my story, and I cried, and I went home, and I did no work, and I came back the next week and told everybody the latest and cried some more, and I got nowhere because I didn't actually do the work. Then I took a break for a couple of years, and then about 3 years ago, I got back into CoDA because of a very unhealthy situation. And this time I really decided to jump right in and do the work. So I joined the events committee and did service. I got the green workbook, which we're going to talk about. I got a sponsor. I worked the steps. I really committed myself to CoDA, and it made a gigantic difference in my life. So I'm telling you the how not to do CoDA because I already tried that. And the how to do CoDA to actually get results. You can't just show up and watch and don't do anything in between meetings. You really do have to do the work. And this committee has put together some fantastic workshops, which you'll see today, and a lot of our past workshops are online, and we'll go through all of that. So I encourage you to not be afraid, jump right in. You're among friends. You will find the most support you've ever experienced in your life in this program. I wanted to turn it over to Alex. Alex, if you want to just give a few minutes on how you got here and what it's done for you.
Okay, my name is Alex, codependent. It'll be less than a few minutes for me, but I came from a dysfunctional childhood like so many other codependents. My mom died when I was young. My father, that I had only a superficial relationship with, found a woman that did not like children who was quite a bit younger. He was hardly ever home. Thank God I had two older sisters which helped, but they could not replace the parent-child relationship. I also had a severe learning disability, which added to my low self-worth and self-esteem. I was put back in second grade, had a D- average. They passed me just because they didn't know what to do with me. I was extremely depressed and turned to smoking cigarettes and drinking alcohol when I was 12, and later to hard drugs and to numb the pain. My intimacy skills are pretty much non-existent. I tried to be cool on the outside, but on the inside, I was full of fear and self-doubt. I was in many short-term relationships because I was emotionally unavailable and would pick women with similar issues. I would start to get close to them, the woman, then found that ways to drive them away. That created huge abandonment issues, stemming back to my childhood, and my emotional pain would hurt so bad that I would turn to more drinking and more drugs to numb the pain. It was a vicious cycle. I became a member of AA, and after years of sobriety, I found myself again picking women that were unemotionally available. I was, and as I was, and there was constant fighting and power struggling, and my last relationship brought me to CoDA. In CoDA, let's see, I've learned to identify my character defects and work on healing them with the help of others and doing the steps of the program. It has been and will continue to be an ongoing process. I've learned to be kinder and more patient with myself. I used to beat the shit out of myself. I have learned to feel and to heal and not to be ashamed of who I am, or should I say I'm learning. The need to control myself and others has lessened. I'm better at being direct. Don't need to hide behind my shame. I'm not a secret anymore, but I'm just a human being with faults just like everybody else. I've grown closer to my higher power, who I turn to on a regular basis. I've come to see that I'm just another imperfect human being, and that's okay. I see hope. Now that I see hope that I can be in a functional relationship for the first time. But I've also learned to be more comfortable with myself. Going to CoDA meetings on a regular basis and reaching out to others has been a lifesaver for me. Thank God for Zoom meetings. These are a real lifesaver. I don't know what I'd do. I moved downtown Phoenix in a little apartment in the art district where I don't know anybody, and before these Zoom meetings, I was getting pretty heavily depressed. So I hope I see hope where there was none, and I can choose to have a better life. And thanks to CoDA and the people in it. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Rona, do you want to share a little bit?
Sure, yeah, thanks. Hi, I'm Rona. Yeah, I'm recovering codependent. I came into CoDA was my first fellowship 11 years ago. I came in via some professional training that I was doing. It was kind of like heal thyself. And the first weekend they mentioned codependency and like the whole room was in tears. And I was really depressed about being codependent, to be honest. And I really hated my first meeting. It was January and it was really miserable in London. And I was just like, I don't want to have to look at this. And I was angry because I'd done a bunch of outside work, you know. But it made so much sense. It joined so many dots together. I struggled probably for the first couple of years in CoDA, and I came out of CoDA because there was other fellowships I needed to go to and other addictions I needed to address, which I'm really grateful for now because I can see that I was wanting CoDA to be my kind of one-stop shop for all of it, whereas now I have an understanding of each of those different areas of my life. And I really guess I came back to CoDA a couple of years after that. When I was traveling, and I reconnected with CoDA when I was living in the States and living in New Zealand. And I really loved how international the family was of CoDA, really. That really helped me to connect to it and build intimacy. And and working the steps, has been really life-changing for me, I'd say. I feel like my relationships are just so much more equal these days. I carry a hell of a lot less shame. I know I'm a work in progress, but there's an honesty and a playfulness and a hell of a lot less drama. I can use my drama that I think my higher power gave me for creative energy rather than kind of creating chaos, which is what it was doing beforehand when I wasn't using my creative energy and was using it in complicated codependent ways. And I've been on the committee since April, which it's been life-changing actually, being part of the committee and just giving service on a regular basis, and just really being part of CoDA community. And I just feel like there's just so much to learn and discover, it does feel like a journey of self-love. Yeah, thanks.
That's a perfect description. And the minimizing drama is a big plus. Okay, so Let's talk a little bit about what is codependency. So this is basically the dictionary definition. It's an emotional and behavioral condition that affects an individual's ability to have healthy, mutually satisfying relationships. It's also known as relationship addiction because people with codependency often form or maintain relationships that are one-sided, emotionally destructive, and/or abusive. Codependency often affects a spouse, parent, sibling, friend, or coworker of a person afflicted with alcohol or drug dependence. That's how it was initially first noticed, but then what was discovered was that as the person got clean or sober, the codependent didn't get any better. And that's kind of how it was identified as its own separate condition. Similar patterns have been seen in people in relationships with chronically ill or mentally ill individuals. Today, however, the term has broadened to describe any codependent person from any dysfunctional family. And then this definition is right out of the Codependents Anonymous Big Book, which we'll talk about and tell you where to get it shortly. Somewhere along the road, we all learn about codependence. We hear about it from a friend or a therapist. We see it mentioned in the news. Many of us wonder if codependence describes who we are. That's why you're here. You're trying to figure out if you're codependent or not, and we're going to help you out with that. Probably yes. Codependence is a disease that deteriorates our souls. It affects our personal lives, our families, children, friends, relatives, our businesses and careers, our health, and our spiritual growth. It is debilitating, and if left untreated, causes us to become more destructive to ourselves and others. Many of us come to a point when we must look beyond ourselves for help. It all begins with an honest look at ourselves. I'm going to share a quick story about careers because it's not something we talk about a ton in CoDA, because generally we're struggling with more personal relationships. But one of the ways I knew I needed help was I had gotten a job right out of college as a teacher, and I was teaching art. And I was 1 month into it. I was 22 years old. And when you're a teacher, the principal often comes to observe your lesson plans to kind of see how you're doing. And in my case, the superintendent of schools, which was the highest authority in the system, came to observe my class on Halloween day when all the kids were in costume. And I'm already the art teacher, which is fun time anyway. And the kids were bouncing off the walls because they're kids, and I was a brand new teacher, and I didn't really know how to control the classroom, and they were having fun, and I didn't really see a problem with it. But anyway, he came and observed, and I broke out into hives. And then about a week later, he came with his written evaluation and sat down to talk to me. And the first thing he said was, I saw a great teacher who didn't have her classroom under control. And it was honest criticism, but as a codependent, taking criticism is super hard. So I just burst out in tears. I was beside myself because as a people pleaser perfectionist, I didn't want to hear that I wasn't doing a fantastic job, even though I knew I wasn't. And the poor man did not know how to deal with me. He was like, "Oh my gosh, Linda, you're overreacting. Please, here's a tissue." And like he felt so horrible, but it wasn't his fault. He was doing his job, and it was legit criticism. And now I look back on it, and I'm so embarrassed that I behaved that way in a professional setting. And it's happened other times in my career where I automatically jumped to the conclusion that I did something wrong. But with CoDA, I've been able to learn how to control it and talk myself out of those negative thoughts. So it's just something that pervades every area of your life. And as we're going through the next page, which is patterns and characteristics, I invite you to kind of take a look at which ones you can identify with and which areas of your life you see that it may be affecting you. So this is one of our pieces of literature that you can get at meetings or you can buy online, and we'll show you where, but it basically goes over the patterns and characteristics of codependence. So I'll read the first couple, and then Alex and Rona, if you guys want to jump in, I'll do denial and low self-esteem, and you guys can take the rest. So for denial patterns, codependents often have difficulty identifying what they are feeling. Minimize, alter, or deny how they truly feel. Perceive themselves as completely unselfish and dedicated to the well-being of others. With the low self-esteem patterns, codependents often have difficulty making decisions. They judge what they think, say, or do harshly as never good enough. Are embarrassed to receive recognition, praise, or gifts. Are unable to identify or ask for what they need and want. Value others' approval of their thinking, feelings, and behavior over their own. Do not perceive themselves as lovable or worthwhile persons. Rona, can you do compliance and control?
Yeah, sure. Compliance patterns. Codependents often compromise their values and integrity to avoid rejection and other people's anger. Are very sensitive to others' feelings and assume the same feelings. Codependents are extremely loyal, remaining in harmful situations too long. Codependents place a higher value on others' opinions and feelings and are afraid to express differing viewpoints or feelings. Codependents put aside their own interests in order to do what others want. Codependents accept sex as a substitute for love. Control patterns. Codependents often believe people are incapable of taking care of themselves. Attempt to convince others what to think, do, or feel. Become resentful when others decline their help or reject their advice. Freely offer advice and direction without being asked. Codependents often lavish gifts and favors on those they want to influence. Codependents often use sex to gain approval and acceptance. Codependents often have to feel needed in order to have a relationship with others. Thanks.
I'm Alex, codependent. Avoidance patterns. Codependents often act in ways to invite others to reject, shame, or express anger towards them. 2, judge harshly what others think or say or do. 3, avoid emotional, physical, or sexual intimacy to avoid feeling vulnerable. 4, allow addictions to people, places, and things to distract them from achieving intimacy in their relationships. Use indirect or evasive communication to avoid conflict or confrontation. 6, believe displays of emotions are a sign of weakness. I have that one. I can't, the note, longer list of, there's a longer list of these patterns and characteristics. This is kind of a brief synopsis, what do you want to call it? Am I codependent? Personal crisis or unbearable? Chronic emotional pain brought by many of us to CoDA. We came to our first meeting feeling helpless and helpless. We wondered why our efforts to fix ourselves and others were not working. No matter how we tried, we had come to a crossroad. Continue our old ways of coping or look back or look for a new way out of our pain.
Thanks, Alex.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we wanted to talk a little bit about the resources available at Codependents Anonymous. There are meetings, both live and Zoom. Some live meetings are still happening. It really depends on where you are. Workshops, we're here every Saturday doing workshops. There are other fellowships, other CoDA groups around the world that are also doing workshops. Once you're in CoDA and going to meetings, we encourage you to work the 12 steps. You can also work the 12 traditions, and we'll get into a little bit more of what that means. Sponsorship, we highly suggest that you get a sponsor. Sponsors are female sponsors for females and male sponsors for males. And your sponsor is there to assist you in working the 12 steps and understanding the program. Fellowship, that's what we're doing right now. We're making friends, we're making connections. We have people that we can reach out to when we're having a bad day. When there isn't a pandemic, we often plan fun events to go to the movies or go tubing or do whatever, just to hang out and have some fun together. And then outreach, we have phone lists available that we distribute. So if you need to speak with somebody, you can just pick up a phone list and call them and say, hi, this is so-and-so, I got your number off the outreach phone list. And you can make an outreach call if you're having a bad day, or you just need to vent or talk to someone or share, or whatever. Rona, Alex, you have anything to add to any of the resources?
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, I'll jump in. I'll say, I just wanted to say, maybe for people, people might not know what working the 12 steps and working the 12 traditions means. Like I know when I first went to CoDA, I was like, I didn't understand. I got quite bamboozled by all the jargon, and that kind of made me kind of feel even more overwhelmed than I was. Yeah, so working the 12 steps is typically what that is in a sponsor relation. Some people sometimes ask, oh, can I work the 12 steps alone? I personally would say no. I think the kind of common message is it's strongly advised against. The idea is that we have a sponsor who guides us ideally, and we can also or we can also work the steps in a co-sponsor relationship. And the idea is that we work with a sponsor who's worked all 12 steps themselves. And so the idea is that they can act kind of like a guide, kind of, I think about it like leading us out of some kind of swamp onto some kind of lovely meadow, and like they know the way, they know the route. And typically, I mean, lots of people work with their sponsors in different ways. The way that I've heard is the most common is to work with a sponsor either over the phone or in person, or at the moment obviously over Zoom, for an hour a week. And then you would do your step work outside of those meetings. And so doing step work, what that means is we have a green workbook called the CoDA Steps and Traditions book that you can buy from CoDA Literature, and that it's essentially, step work is essentially reading and writing. That's what it is. It's a series of questions. Each step is a spiritual concept, and represents a kind of spiritual concept which you then start to integrate in your life by answering the questions. And the questions are personal reflections on your life. And the idea is that by going into a kind of into a personal inquiry, transformation occurs. And the sponsor relationship, as with a lot of the different tools in CoDA, as in 12 steps, the sponsor relationship is kind of a beginning, can be a kind of beginning role model or a beginning template for healthy relationship, because that sponsor has worked the 12 steps. They know how to, ideally they'll know how to set, so setting boundaries, for instance, the fact that you'll make a time where you both agree to meet, and showing up to that meeting on time, having a time boundary together, that starts us as sponsees straight away to practice healthy recovery, practice healthy boundaries, which we may have never had. I know I grew up in a family with very few boundaries, and so even getting to a meeting on time was a really good boundary for me. And working the 12 traditions, they're in the green workbook, they're integrated, so it's like step 1 and then it's tradition 1. My understanding is that most people normally do the 12 steps first, and then you might choose to do the traditions. And there's also something called step study groups. You might see, though, that's another way of working the steps. And sometimes people choose to do it that way. Other people do it because they might have difficulty finding a sponsor one-to-one, and they're keen to get started with the 12 steps. And so they start to attend a CoDA step study group instead. Also, I'll just say something about outreach, if it's okay. Like outreach, again, was something that I was really intimidated by at the beginning. The idea of, so outreach is calling people between meetings. The idea is that we stay in contact with fellows, and it's almost can be thought of as like having a mini meeting on the phone. So you could even start the call with saying like, oh, hi, I'm Rona, I'm codependent, or, and you can, sometimes fellows will agree. They'll say like, oh, can we do a 3 and 3? So that would mean I would share for 3 minutes and they share for 3 minutes. And you can say whether you want feedback on your share or not, or you can just speak freely, and you can just have a kind of organic, spontaneous call. talking about, and he would typically talk about, you know, some of the challenges that you're facing at the moment with your codependency. And then you can choose whether that person reflects back, or, you know, whether they relate to you, or if you just want to be heard. And initially I was so intimidated by outreach calls. I knew I needed them because, like I said, there was a lot of drama in my life, but I was very avoidant of them. And I felt like, and so what I did instead was I ended up taking loads of phone calls and just trying to rescue people instead. And just, you know, rather than making the outreach calls, it actually took me going into another program where there was a rule that you had to make 3 outreach calls a day to break the back of that for me. Because I always just felt like if I was calling somebody, I was pestering them. Whereas now I have the understanding that when somebody calls me, it's great because it reminds me that I'm in a program, that there's a solution. And more than likely, you know, that speaking to that person will bring me back to higher power in some way. And now outreach is something that I really love, and deep friendships and deep relationships. And again, it's another tool. The way all these tools have been thought about, they spiritually work on us. And so, you know, outreach starts to develop, like, you know, done well, it starts to develop really healthy intimacy and a depth of vulnerability and safety that perhaps we don't have in our life outside of fellowship yet. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. That was a fabulous explanation. Okay, so what we wanted to do next is give you a little bit of an online tour of what's available on the various CoDA websites and social media. So we'll start with coda.org. That's the main CoDA website. And I'm just going to click on it and bring you there so you can see. So what you will want to do as newcomers is click on the Newcomers tab. And that will bring you to the welcome, which we're going to read.
We can't see that yet, Linda.
Oh, okay. Hold on. Let me stop sharing. Thank you. I'll stop sharing and then reshare. There we go. Does that work?
Great.
Okay, perfect. So this is coda.org. You're going to click on the Newcomers tab. It brings you to this page. We're going to go over the welcome when we start the retreat, and we're going to read the preamble when we start the retreat. So I'm not going to go over that, but there's printable PDFs if you want to print them out. If you go down at the bottom about CoDA, there's what is codependence, which we kind of went over that already. What to expect. This tab will tell you a little bit about what to expect at your first meeting. There's the CoDA meeting locator is here. Sometimes meeting information changes and it doesn't make it to the website, so you can call the contact person to confirm that the meeting is still there and still happening. Most meetings, you never know how many people could be there. There could be 5, there could be 25, there could be 60, and they're either an hour and a half, it depends, but it'll be on the meeting list how long the meeting is. This, you can read this on your own. It goes over what happens at the meetings. We do readings, and we're going to do the same readings when we start the retreat in a few minutes. What I did want to show you again down here, the patterns of codependence is what we just read. The patterns of recovery, you definitely will want to read over this. This goes over the patterns of like where we're at when we first start CoDA, which is the patterns that we just read over. And then in recovery, what happens, what the difference is. So for example, codependents often have difficulty identifying what they're feeling. In recovery, we become aware of our feelings and identify them often in the moment, and we know the difference between thoughts and feelings. So you can read this over. It goes over all of the patterns and characteristics and the recovery patterns. This is, you know, what we're aiming for is on the right-hand side. Then down here, there's FAQs. The store is something that I wanted to go through with you. So here is where you can buy what we call the big book and the green workbook. So the big book is the CoDA book, this one, Codependents Anonymous. You'll definitely want to pick that up. If you go to live meetings, they should have this available for sale. And then let me see if this is the right page. I'm looking for the green workbook that you're gonna want to purchase? This one. Okay, so this book, the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions workbook, you're definitely going to want to buy that one as well. This is the one that has all the 12 steps in it and all of the questions to work the steps and the traditions. So you're definitely going to want those too. There are also different pamphlets that you may want to pick up. Here we go. So you can go through and you know, buy one pick up the ones that appeal to you. There's your first meeting. What is CoDA? This is a good one. What is CoDA? Am I codependent? All kinds of different pamphlets. So go through and read, you know, see which ones appeal to you. And if you do go, Peeling the Onion is a great one. I would recommend that one as well. There's a Newcomers handbook. So just browse through, you can get an idea. There are some downloadable worksheets and different things on here as well. So that's the main CoDA site. Then we have azcoda.org. So this is our events committee site, and we are based in Arizona, but because of Zoom, we've become very international. So the thing that you'll want to know about this site is that it has all of our Arizona meetings. It has our upcoming Arizona events. And when you go here, it will take you to our speaker series. So this has information on the speaker series that we do every Saturday. This is our retreat today with the agenda, which we're going to go through in a second. And then, let's see. If you go to the events committee page, it has our workshop library. So the live workshops that were held prior to COVID, there's recordings, audio recordings here. If you click on this link, if you click on here, the Saturday speaker series, there will be videos of these different workshops that we've already done. So there's handouts that you can download. There's videos that you can watch on here. So these are the videos that you can click on and watch. Then we also have a Facebook page. So Rona, if you want to talk them through this, you can go to our Facebook page. This is what it looks like. When you see the cactus, you'll know you're in the right place, but it's at CoDA Arizona.
Yeah, no, thanks. Yeah, so I think you know this page a bit more than I do, so feel free to jump in.
Oh, okay.
I don't feel at all territorial about it. Yeah, so here's our virtual spiritual retreat and all the details of that. And
sorry, hold on. It's asking me to log in and I don't want to. Okay, there we go.
Sure, yeah. And we also, we have someone who gives service every day. They post, because one of the books that we also have is the CoDA meditation book, In This Moment. And that's a really beautiful book. And we have somebody who gives service and they post the In This Moment meditation on the CoDA Arizona page every day, which is great. And then we also have on this page, like, so as on the CoDA Arizona website, on here we also have the links to the YouTubes of, because for nearly all of our workshops, unless we have a request not to, we record our workshops. And so we've got this amazing archive of CoDA resources so that you can access all of those through the Facebook page. And then they also take you to the YouTube too. So yeah, so it's a really great resource.
Yeah, these videos are really incredible if you have time to, some of them are speaker meetings where people are sharing, some of them are on specific topics, but they're really, really interesting.
Yeah, and they don't break anonymity because they don't share the faces of anybody. So yeah, you can hear, you might, if you're a regular, you might hear regular voices, familiar voices, but there isn't, their faces aren't on there. So yeah, they're great. I listened to one the other day actually. Yeah, they're fantastic.
Yeah, they sure are.
Yeah, an amazing resource. Yeah. Yeah.
And today, just as a reminder, we are recording everything, but your face and your voice will never appear on a video. So feel free to share. It won't go beyond anyone who's on the call today. And then on YouTube, if you go to YouTube, you can search right here. Just type in CoDA Arizona, and 2 different pages will come up. We had a problem with our Gmail and our logging in. These are both us. So when you go to, for example, this page, it has all the videos. They're also on the Facebook page. So if you don't do YouTube and you'd rather just go to Facebook, they're there. But if you're not on Facebook at all and you want to find the videos, they're here as well. Okay.
Fantastic.
So let me stop sharing that. And
Should we do that example of the crosstalk? Should we do that?
Yes, please.
I don't even know how this will go, but
kind of explain what it is.
Yeah, well, I just thought that again, like, okay, so I'll just say, like, so it depends on how new you are and if CoDA is your first fellowship. I just thought it might be helpful, we could just do an example of what crosstalk is, just because I know when the first ever 12-step meeting I went to was in a different fellowship, and I crosstalked and I didn't know what happened. The whole room just went in a mood with me. I was like 16 and terrified. And sometimes, like, we can hear the crosstalk statement, but we can hear it so many times, or hear it, it's just like, it's a very specific language. And so I thought we just thought we might have a play with kind of like demonstrating kind of what crosstalk is versus what it isn't. At least one example of it. So crosstalk, shall I just say about it a bit first, or do we?
Yeah, sure.
So in CoDA Arizona, we read a statement called the safety statement, which is where we say, like, we have I statement. And so Linda or Alex, do you want to do a kind of fake share, and then I'll crosstalk and demonstrate?
Sure.
Okay, cool.
So
1 minute.
Okay, so let's see, what should I share about? Okay, so last week,
so we're just pretending we're in a meeting for a moment.
Yes, we're in a meeting.
We're just fellows in a meeting, and I'm listening. Yeah.
So last week I had a tough day at work. I just started a new job, and the person that was training me was kind of going through things very quickly, and I kind of felt like she wasn't giving me enough time to really learn. And then I started beating myself up because I felt stupid, and I was afraid that they were going to think that I didn't know what I was doing, but it was really because she didn't train me. So I was trying to do these purchase orders and I kept messing them up, and then I had to recall them, and everybody knew that I was recalling them, and it just didn't go well at all. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Linda. Hi, I'm Rona. I had a really similar day the other day. I'm finding my new job really difficult too. Yeah, and I find that I really beat myself up as well when things don't go as I think that they should. And
yeah, isn't that a horrible feeling? I hate when that happens. It just makes it terrible.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it leaves me feeling really really alone, actually. Yeah, so we'll just stop there for a minute. So there was a minute when me doing that silly coughing thing, I was trying to do the crosstalk of kind of making a sort of interrupting what somebody was saying as well. I mean, obviously you're allowed to cough or sneeze or whatever, but what I was doing there essentially was that I was referring to Linda's share in my share. So I was directly addressing. So when we're in 12-step fellowship, when we're in CoDA, we don't ever directly address somebody else's share. I mean, obviously it's different if, well, it might not be obvious. It's different if somebody is presenting. If somebody gives a chair or gives a qualification, then we respond directly. We say, oh, you know, I really loved what you shared. But if somebody is just a fellow in another meeting, we don't refer to their share. We don't directly speak to them by name, and we don't address them. And if I had a hard day at work and I did really relate to what Linda said, right, because that happens, of course, I would just speak about it in a more detached, more spacious way, such as, and I would just not refer to Linda's share in my share. So I might say something like, oh, hi, I'm Rona, I'm codependent. I started a new job recently. And so I would share it as if Linda's share was entirely separate to mine, and I was just sharing whatever I was thinking. And then if I felt like, you know, there was a really powerful connection between what Linda shared, I could approach her after the meeting and I could say, there was something about your share that I really related to. Would you mind if I responded? You know, would you mind if I have feedback, gave you feedback, or could we have a conversation? And I would directly then connect, you know, because yeah, I mean, there's a huge amount of literature about why we don't crosstalk in meetings, and we can talk about that more if that's helpful. But one of the main reasons is that most people who come to CoDA have grown up in a dysfunctional family of some kind or another and have been commented upon, and have also had their own experiences, their feelings misinterpreted, or they've been projected onto, or they've been scapegoated, etc. And so when we come into CoDA and we aren't commented upon, and we can share freely, and we know that nobody's going to comment on what we share, it's incredibly healing and powerful. Yeah.
Yes, and then I jumped in and interrupted you, even though it was like, oh, I can so relate. We don't ever interrupt anyone else who's talking. It's their time. We don't really try to comfort them, or we let them feel their feelings. And when you go to your first meeting, if you haven't already, they kind of go through the guidelines at the beginning. So I put in the chat our group email address, codearizona@gmail.com. If you have questions as newcomers, please feel free to reach out. We'd be happy to help you. If you can't find a particular piece of literature, or you just have any kind of questions, please reach out, because we are here for you to help you begin your journey. We are just about coming up on 10 o'clock. So we're going to start the retreat for the broader audience. Please feel free to share if you'd like to. You will not be forced to in any way, shape, or form. If you want to just observe, take notes, whatever, whatever works for you, please do what's best for you. Thank you. Thank you so much, newcomers. We love having you here. We really do. You are the program.
Thanks so much. And thanks so much for your courage. It takes courage.
Yes, it takes a lot of courage to be here.
Yeah, to look at this stuff.
We're super happy.
Yeah, well done. Yeah.